Now that we've learned what the rules of iambic pentameter are, let's see how Shakespeare breaks those rules. As you've learned, an iamb is a metrical foot. It consists of one unstressed and one stressed syllable. When we say that a line of verse is iambic, it means that it's made up of iambic feet. The word pentameter refers to the number of iambic feet in a line of verse. A line of iambic pentameter contains 5 iambic feet, adding up to 10 syllables per line, but we're really interested in counting feet rather than syllables. Shakespeare is well known for his use of iambic pentameter. Some of the most famous lines in English literature are in iambic pentameter, such as this speech from The Merchant of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. That speech follows the rules of iambic pentameter pretty strictly, but let's take a look at what happens when Shakespeare breaks the rules. We'll do this by looking at one of his sonnets, Sonnet 71. No longer mourn for me when I am dead, then you shall hear the surly sudden bell give warning to the world that I am fled from this vile world with vilest worms to dwell. If we put in the marks that indicate the rhythm, this is what we get. I'll read this with a little greater emphasis than I normally would. It won't be naturalistic in its sound, but it'll show you where the iambs are. No longer mourn for me when I am dead, then you shall hear the surly sudden bell give warning to the world that I am fled from this vile world with vilest worms to dwell. You'll notice in that last line there's an irregularity. Shakespeare is breaking the rules. He's breaking them in this case so that the iambs don't lull us to sleep, and so that we pay attention to that particular line. Here's where the irregularity occurs. It's not from this vile world with vilest worms to dwell. It really is from this vile world with vilest worms to dwell. There's an extra emphasis there. We don't have an iamb here. If you want to know the technical term for it, this is a spondee, a 2-syllable foot where both the syllables are stressed. Let's go on and read the rest of the poem and see where the rhythm varies. Nay, if you read this line, remember not the hand that write it, for I love you so that I in your sweet thoughts would be forgot, if thinking on me then should make you woe. We have an irregularity in the first line here, the 5th line of the sonnet overall, the first line on this screen. Nay, if you read this line. You really can't say, nay, if you read this line. It doesn't work. So we have another spondee that starts us off here. Nay, if you read this line, remember not the hand that write it, for I love you so that I in your sweet thoughts would be forgot. There's another irregularity. If thinking on me then should make you woe. We had an irregularity in the 4th line of the 1st quatrain of the sonnet. Here we have an irregularity in the 3rd line of the 2nd quatrain of the sonnet. Your sweet thoughts. Going on, we have another opening that varies the iambic stresses. Oh, if, I say, you look upon this verse, when I perhaps compounded am with clay, do not so much as my poor name rehearse, but let your love e'en with my life decay. The 3rd line of the 3rd quatrain also has that spondee in the middle, varying the rhythm and calling our attention to it. The final couplet reads like this. Lest the wise world should look into your moan and mock you with me after I am gone. There's a lot of variety of rhythm in this closing couplet. We begin with a stressed beat and then have an unstressed. Lest the wise world, have 2 stressed words in a row, should look into your moan, that closes out in regular iambic pentameter, and mock you with me after I am gone. In the middle of the last line, too, we have an unusual set of rhythms. And mock you with me after I am gone. It's an exciting way to end the sonnet, and if you're paying attention to the rhythm, you'll notice that the variety is intentional. Shakespeare didn't miscount his beats, didn't misstress some syllables, but he planned for this last couplet to call our attention to all these places where the stresses are not what we might expect. Now, why is that important? If you're paying attention to the rhythm, and particularly to the times when Shakespeare deviates from the expected, you'll find that another level of meaning emerges. Let's take a look at the opening lines of Midsummer Night's Dream by way of example. Here is what Theseus says at the beginning of that play. Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. I'm going to pause there and just note that the first 2 syllables of this speech are both stressed, so we already have something unexpected to begin the play, to start us off with a bang. Now, fair Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws on apace. 4 happy days bring in another moon. Here we have another set of unusual stresses. It could be read 4 happy days bring in, but I think we need a stress on 4. 4 happy days bring in another moon. And then it's after that colon that things really become interesting. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. With those stresses, it's very difficult to read that line quickly. The line itself, the stresses, the variations from the iambs are making Theseus's speech run slower as he thinks about how much time it is until his wedding day and how long it's going to be. But oh, methinks how slow this old moon wanes. All those O sounds also help to slow things out. And then we go back into regular iambs for a minute here. She lingers my desires like to a stepdame or a dowager, long withering out a young man's revenue. In the last line, we get one more unusual stress that slows up the line. Young man's revenue. Let's compare those to Hippolyta's opening lines, delivered immediately after. 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night, 4 nights will quickly dream away the time, and then the moon like to a silver bow, new bent in heaven, shall behold the night of our solemnities. Just as it's hard to read the old moon wanes quickly, it's hard to read Hippolyta's 2 opening lines here slowly. 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night, 4 nights will quickly dream away the time. The regularity of the Iambic Pentameter in those lines carries us straight through to Hippolyta's point of view about the wedding, which is that it's going to come more quickly than you would expect. And that's the end of this brief summary. I thank you for the time you spent with me.